Gregory Pincus, 1903 to 1967. Gregory Pincus was the American biologist who played the principal role in the development of the oral contraceptive pill. Although he was never particularly well known, he had far more actual influence on the world than many people who are world famous. The pill has a twofold importance. In a world that is increasingly concerned with the dangers of overpopulation, the significance of the pill as an agent for population control is obvious. Less direct perhaps, but equally revolutionary, is the effect the pill has had in changing sexual mores. It is widely recognized that over the last 30 years, there has been a revolution in sexual attitudes in the United States. Doubtless, there are many other political, economic, and sociological factors that have influenced that revolution, but the largest single factor has clearly been the advent of the pill. Previously, the fear of unwanted pregnancy was a major factor in inhibiting many women from engaging in premarital or even marital sex. Suddenly, women have been presented with the opportunity to engage in sexual relations without fear of pregnancy, and the change in circumstances has frequently produced a change in both attitude and behavior. It might be objected that the development of Innovate, the first birth control pill, was not really all that important, since safe and reasonably reliable contraceptive methods had been known previously. Such an argument ignores the distinction between a method of contraception that is technically effective and one that is psychologically acceptable. Before the development of the pill, the contraceptive most recommended by experts was the diaphragm. Diaphragms are indeed safe and reasonably reliable, but in practice, the great majority of women were and still are reluctant to use them. It is noteworthy that when the pill was first being tested, many hundreds of women preferred to take a chance with an untried method of birth control rather than use the safe and time tested diaphragm. It might also be objected that the development of Innovate was not really such a great triumph, since there are some risks to health involved in its use, and since it may eventually be superseded, perhaps even in the near future, by newer and safer drugs or devices. But in the nature of things, future methods of contraception can represent only a comparatively slight improvement, since the pill is already widely accepted and is generally satisfactory. History will, or at least should, consider the development of Innovate in the 1950s as the crucial breakthrough in birth control methods. Many persons contributed to the development of the oral contraceptive pill. Indeed, the idea had been talked about for a long time. The trouble was that nobody knew just what chemicals should go inside such a pill. Curiously, the key discovery had been made as far back as 1937. In that year, A.W. Makepeace, G. L. Weinstein, and M. H. Friedman had demonstrated that injections of progesterone, one of the female sex hormones, would inhibit ovulation in laboratory animals. However, perhaps because hypodermic injections did not sound like an attractive method of birth control, or perhaps because progesterone was at that time an extremely expensive chemical, the discovery had not aroused the interest of birth control advocates. The main development of the pill did not start until about 1950, when the American biologist Gregory Pincus began to work on the problem. Apparently, it was Margaret Sanger, the long-term advocate of family planning, who persuaded him to work on the project. She could hardly have chosen a better man, For Pincus was an expert in steroid metabolism and in the physiology of reproduction in mammals, as well as being director of laboratories at the Worcester Foundation for Experimental Biology in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. Apparently, Pincus, with his superb combination of technical knowledge and scientific intuition, hit upon the general nature of the solution almost immediately. Soon he had Dr. Chang, a researcher at the Worcester Foundation, testing progesterone on laboratory animals to see if it would suppress ovulation even when taken orally. Chang's experiments were successful. This was certainly a promising beginning, particularly in view of the fact that a few years earlier a chemist named Russell Marker had invented a way to synthesize progesterone cheaply. Another important contributor was Dr. John Rock, a gynecologist, who at Pincus's suggestion conducted tests which showed that progesterone taken orally would inhibit ovulation in human females. However, Rock's research also discussed two serious difficulties with using progesterone as an oral contraceptive. In the first place, it only suppressed ovulation about 85% of the time. In the second place, unreasonably large doses were needed to accomplish even that. But Pincus, who was convinced that he was on the right track, was not ready to give up. He realized that there might be another compound chemically similar to progesterone, but without its disadvantages. In September 1953, he asked various chemical companies to send him samples of any synthetic steroids that had manufactured that were chemically related to progesterone. Pincus tested the chemicals that he received, and one of them, norethanondrol, seemed particularly effective. This was a lucky break for Pincus, since when he had begun his research back in 1950, norethanondrol had not even existed. It had been synthesized in 1952 by Dr. Frank B. Colton, a biochemist working in the Seattle laboratories, and was later patented in his name. However, neither Colton nor any of his supervisors at GD Sear had been deliberately trying to create an oral contraceptive, nor at the time did they realize they had created one. Further tests performed by the research group that had been assembled by Pincus indicated that norethanondrol would still be more effective if supplemented by a small admixture of another chemical, mestranol. It was this combination of drugs which was eventually marketed by GD Sear and Company as Innovate. By 1955, Pincus could see that the time was ripe for a large-scale field test of the pill. The tests were begun in April 1956 in a suburb of San Juan, Puerto Rico, under the supervision of Dr. Idris Rice Ray. Within about 9 months, her tests indicated how strikingly effective the oral contraceptive pill was. Nevertheless, testing was continued for 3 more years before the Food and Drug Administration approved the marketing of Innovate in May 1960. From the foregoing, it is obvious that Gregory Pincus did not develop the contraceptive pill by himself. It was Frank Colton who actually created norethanondrol. Clearly, Colton and the various chemists who paved the way for his achievement are entitled to a considerable part of the credit. Similarly, various other men who worked with the Pincus group, including John Rock, Min Chua Chang, and Dr. Celso Raymond Garcia, made important contributions. For that matter, Dr. Rice Ray, Margaret Sanger, and various others whom I have not mentioned each played a role in the overall accomplishment. Nevertheless, there seems no doubt that Gregory Pincus was the principal figure and the driving force behind the entire project. He was the scientist who decided to devote his life and effort to an active search for an oral contraceptive. He was the one who had the scientific and organizational ability to carry the project through successfully. He thought of the basic idea, obtained financing for the research, and got other talented men to work on the project. He had the vision and determination to push the project through to successful completion, and he is the one who has received and who deserves the principal credit for the accomplishment. Gregory Pincus was born in 1903 in Woodbine, New Jersey, the son of Russian Jewish parents. He graduated from Cornell in 1924 and received a doctorate from Harvard in 1927. Afterward, he did research in several institutions, including Harvard and Cambridge, and was a professor at Clark for several years. In 1944, he helped found the Worcester Foundation for Experimental Biology, and for a long time afterwards was director of laboratories there. He was the author of over 250 scientific papers as well as a book, The Conquest of Fertility, published in 1965. During his lifetime, Pincus received many scientific honors. However, neither he nor any of the men involved in the development of the pill received a Nobel Prize. When Pincus died in Boston in 1967, his death went almost unnoticed by the general public, and for that matter, by most scientists. Today, few encyclopedias even mention his name. Nevertheless, he was the principal architect of one of the most significant developments in human history.